Joining us on the phone now is Greg Feith, a former investigator at the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB. Greg, if you've been able to look at any of our footage so far, you've seen that we've gotten a few different angles on the crash. Are you able to tell anything about what might have happened here by these different angles, particularly this one we're showing here, about what happened with this plane?
Well, it's evident that the pilot apparently had some sort of issue, whether it was with the airplane or himself. He was bailing out of the race itself. And as the video shows, the airplane looks like it gets into a bit of a wing rock and then goes uncontrolled. Again, if it was a mechanical malfunction, it may be very difficult for investigators, given the fact that the airplane probably impacted at a speed of 400-plus miles an hour. It was total devastation to the aircraft. If there was any kind of mechanical problem, it may be very difficult to pinpoint. And depending on the condition of the pilot, and again, it was a very devastating accident. The coroner may not be able to determine if there was a medical issue, but that's going to be key in this investigation.
Greg, in terms of trying to help people visualize and understand what happened here, you described this plane as traveling at 400 or 500 miles an hour. It looks like it was going that fast when it crashed. If people have flown like on a Cessna or like a small passenger commercial plane, how fast do those planes typically fly? So we can imagine that in relation to the 400 or 500 miles an hour that this plane was going.
When you look at commercial air travel, if you're flying on an A320 Airbus or a 737, when you're up at cruise altitude, that airplane is moving across the ground at around 500 to 600 miles an hour. So that's the speed that these airplanes are flying at, about 100 to 300 feet above the ground, going around these pylons in a closed-circuit course.
That's incredible. When you described wing rock, what did you mean by that? You could see potentially him going to a wing rock situation before a total loss of control.
If you look at the video, the wings were rolling back and forth left and right, and then the airplane pitched over and went into the ground. That could be evidence of either a mechanical malfunction with what we call the roll control. That is, there's two parts to the wings, and that's called the ailerons, and they cause the airplane to roll. So when the pilot wants to roll right, one aileron goes up, one goes down to induce the roll. There could have been a problem in roll control. There could have been other kind of mechanical problem. And then, of course, if the pilot was having a medical issue and became paralyzed because of the medical issue, or it wasn't able to maintain control of the airplane went in at a very high rate of speed. So it looks like the engine was still operating at a pretty good power setting at the time of impact.
Greg, you described earlier how this P-51 Mustang aircraft is, again, a World War II vintage aircraft, but heavily modified for the purposes of racing. And obviously that means a lot more power, big engine, so that it can go very fast. The plane would have also had to be modified so that the pilot could control it at those speeds, and those would, in effect, be safety modifications. What kind of safety modifications and equipment would this have?
Well, typically, you want to have as light an airplane as possible. So the airplane has to meet a specific standard set forth by the FAA for this type of operation. But when we look at the controllability, there are going to be certain characteristics that are designed into the airplane to handle the very high aerodynamic forces. So rather than having the normal size control wire or control cable that you would use to operate the ailerons or the rudder or the elevator, they may go to an oversized cable that can handle the stresses. So the airplanes are built and redesigned, if you will, to handle the high aerodynamic forces that are typically induced with high-speed flight. And the folks that work on these airplanes and modify them and build them are highly experienced at this. And this particular pilot and this particular race team was very well known. They put together a very good airplane. And so whatever the case was that resulted in this tragic accident, it's going to be key to find out if they can identify a mechanical malfunction or failure, because they'll have to look and see, is it isolated to this type of airplane or this particular airplane, or is this a potential systemic issue amongst the air racing airplanes? So they're going to have their job cut out as far as trying to piece together and identify mechanical issues.
We're speaking with Greg Feith, a former investigator for the National Transportation Safety Board. I should mention that we are awaiting any moment now a press conference from the scene at this Reno Air Races crash at Stead Airport in Reno to learn more about, frankly, the injury toll and the death toll associated with this dramatic and horrific crash of a vintage World War II era aircraft into a box seating area on site at this air crash in the middle of a race. Greg, obviously when the NTSB is investigating plane crashes, it is looking for things that will prevent other planes from crashing. But as you described earlier, this event, this air race in Reno, is a one of its kind event. There aren't other air race events like this in the world, at least not ones exactly like this. And so there isn't much to extrapolate to in terms of this as an event to be sorted out so that you can prevent this from happening. There just aren't that many other aircraft like this. When the NTSB arrives on site in the morning, which we're told they will, what will they be looking for first, I guess?
Well, there's a couple parts to your question as far as an answer. The NTSB is going to be looking, of course, to determine if there was a problem with the airplane. And like you said, yes, this is a very specialized air race. It's a one of a kind. However, these airplanes, even though they're modified, there are a lot of what we call warbirds, airplanes that are similar to this that fly in air shows all over the world. So they're going to have to try and determine if there's an issue with the airplane that could be systemic to airplanes that don't necessarily fly in air races, but they do fly in air shows in front of large crowds, because we don't want to have any kind of control issue. The second part of that question that you asked as far as an answer is that the FAA is going to have to take a hard look. We know that there's been a previous history of accidents, including fatalities, over the years at Reno. And while every one of those pilots, just like a NASCAR team, is trying to mitigate risk when it comes to racing, they're going to have to really take a very hard look at, is it gotten too far or too out of control? That is, have the airplanes been so highly modified that in an event like this, there was no chance for the pilot to take any kind of corrective action and prevent this from happening? And either they're going to move the show line back, that is where the spectators sit, or they're going to move the race course out, which won't make it enjoyable for spectators, or two, they may just stop the program altogether just because of the risk involved.
Greg Feith, former National Transportation Safety Board investigator. Just invaluable insight to have you here with us tonight, Greg. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.